one on the process of being senior and admitting a spouse to a care home. And the other was a survey on Reddit looking at childhood experiences in the environment influencing or predicting pro-environment behavior in later life. Later this summer, she will be presenting in Montreal on student responses to school closures. So, with that introduction.
Hi, thank you very much. Hi, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm Kelly, and I teach psychology as a contract lecturer now, and I do some research in health psychology, and I have a day job on top of that here at the university as well. So today we're going to focus on my favorite teaching topic as opposed to my research, which as you hear is totally scattered and everywhere. And so my favorite teaching topic, though, is cognitive science. And so I thought we would focus on that today. Specifically, today is all about top-down processing. And so we're going to talk about this ability that we have to identify, to understand what we see, seemingly without any effort at all. So this is the task of perception. So I show you this, and you know right away it's a car. Or if you know cars, it's a
blue.
Gone on you. But that's our focus today, is our personal experience, of course, affects how we interpret the world around us. Don't worry, I didn't know what it was either. So beyond interpretation, though, I'm going to argue today that our experience can sometimes actually determine what we see, or determine how we see it. And so when it comes to choosing what we see, then experience can do the choosing for us. So what are some ways in which experience in the world affect what we see or how we see?
Memory.
Sure, tell me more.
Anytime you experience something, you have a memory of it, and then you can relate experiences back to that memory.
Fantastic, yeah. So you have a memory of an event, you see a new object, you relate your experiences back to it. Fantastic. I think it's squeaky brain for you. All right, catch. So that's actually the entire talk in 2 sentences. Yes, go back to your experience, right? So knowledge, then, memory, experience tells us how to experience an event. So you can tackle this, you can say, well, knowledge informs your experiencing of an event, and that's fine, but I'd like to argue that the stronger statement holds true. Knowledge tells us how to experience an event. So next example, I see some lines, I see some colorful boxes on a white background, but if you know art, then you see Mondrian's composition with yellow, blue, and red, right? So experience then tells us how to experience artwork as well, right? It tells us how to see art. Experience leads us to form expectations as well. So, for example, one consistent expectation that we have is that people's faces are important. So why do faces matter? Pardon?
Because we're a social species.
We're a social species. Fantastic, yeah. And so we see people's faces, and what does it do for us?
It helps us recognize people that we know that are important to us that we need to cooperate with to survive.
Fantastic. Survival, yeah, cooperate people that we know we get along with, and so forth. Fantastic. Eyeball. Great. So faces consistently then we know are important. So experience tells us I need to be able to compare a face, I'm in trouble, where's somebody who can help me out. Of course, sometimes we can be so motivated to see faces that it can get us in just a little bit of trouble. Right? Faces are really important to us. We have a dedicated region in the brain, the fusiform face area. You can have the word face in the label, right? That is responsible for noticing faces. But again, we can be a little bit too motivated to see faces sometimes. And see face on Mars issue from, I believe, 1974. Sometimes people think that they're seeing Virgin Mary in a grilled cheese sandwich. If you watch Glee, then sometimes it's the grilled cheeses instead, right? We're so motivated that if there's a possibility of a face being there, we're going to see that face. And again, as you say, we need to survive. We're social people. We work by getting along with others. So if there's a face, I need to make sure that I find it. And so top-down explanations, experience telling us what to notice, can explain these kinds of phenomena. It can explain other times when people think that they see faces in inanimate objects. All right, so we expect to see a face, and sometimes then we see faces when none are present. All right, next example, who here's wearing contacts? Okay, you cannot take part, I'm sorry. Right, but if you're not wearing contacts, just close your eyes and just rub them gently. All right, so close your eyes, rub them gently. Tell me what you see.
Bossy.
Pardon? Phosphines. All right, thank you. Anybody else? What do you see?
Nothing, I'm not looking
Nothing?
at flashes of light.
Flashes of light. That's what most people experience. Do you see color? Yeah, some people see color, some people see flashes of light. There is, of course, not really any light there, right? No flashes of color there. What you've done by rubbing your eyes is stimulate your visual receptors. This comes back to memory, to experience, right? Experience tells us that the particular stimulation that your brain has just received only happens when there's light around. Clearly that's wrong because your finger can produce the same effect, but your brain says, well, if I've got the stimulation going on, there's light present or there is color present. And so we experience light, we experience color when none is really there. So when we're trying to perceive objects, right, if we're looking at faces and cheese sandwiches, if we're looking at artwork and cars and so forth, there are two parts to the process. So your first is your basic form perception. This is the process by which we manage to see the basic shape and size of an object. And next is object recognition. This is the process of identifying that object. So object recognition is key to learning. In much of learning, we have to combine new information with information that was previously learned. But in order to do that, we need to notice connections between related objects. So the process of object recognition starts with detecting very simple visual features. We use our eyes to pick up information. But there's more to it than this. Around the early 1900s, the Gestaltists, right, the Gestalt psychologists, they noticed that our perception of the visual world is organized differently from the stimulus input. That stimulus input, you rub your eyes. What do? You organize the input and you see light. Gestaltists said we organize differently than the raw input. And they reasoned that the person perceiving the object must therefore be organizing it again. And so of course they said that the perceptual whole is something than the sum of its parts. Greater than, exactly. The perceptual whole is greater than, or you can temper that and say different from the sum of its parts. And so if we consider the Necker cube shown on screen, of course, you have seen this before. It is an example of an ambiguous figure. So what makes this cube ambiguous? Yes?
You can see it two ways. It's either coming sort of down and to the left or up and to the right.
Fantastic, yeah. So
You
we
have to
have...
stare at it for a while.
You do have to stare at it for a while. Yeah, and so we have a choice then about how to experience the cube, right? How to see the cube. So one option is to view the cube from above. The other option is to view the cube coming up from below. Both options for perception fit just fine with the information received by our eyes. This leaves us free to choose our interpretation, right? The sum of the parts is different from, greater than perhaps, the whole is greater than rather the sum of the parts. So we're free to choose our interpretation, except our perception is not actually neutral. You do not look at this cube and waffle, see basic lines and waffle. Well, should I see this as 3D? Should I view it from above? Should I view it from below? Instead, you look at the whole and you have an experience right away. So we go beyond the information that has been given by the object itself. So most people who look at this Necker cube, they focus on the lower left corner. Probably this is as a result of, again, experience, right? Typically, somebody hands you a block, you look down at the block. You do not hold the block up and look at it this way. So from experience, we look down on objects, and so we place the lower left corner then at the back of the cube. If you were to view the cube from below instead, the left corner would seem to be in front. So there's more at play here than simply seeing a picture. Then we are interpreting the information as well. And this interpreting happens anytime that we view an object. So another example here, you alternately might see one person or two people, right? This interpreting, again, happens anytime that we are having a visual experience. So Bolotto notes that how we see is by continually redefining reality. And so we are always creating our experience then. We're creating our visual world. Lotto suggests that we're defined by our environment, we're defined by our interaction with the environment, and yes, of course, the experience is empirical. It's based on the raw data, but it is also relative and based on history. And so this is a top-down view of processing. It's a conceptually driven approach, if you will. Again, we form expectations based on our experiences with the world. This informs how we experience sensory inputs, like the pictures I've been sharing today, like the inputs that you produce when you rub your eyes. So in top-down processing, then your beliefs, your thoughts, your expectations help to drive the process of object recognition. Some of this might be conscious, some of this might also be non-conscious. Tell I'm a psychology person, I don't want to say unconscious. Non-conscious, right? So much of this is not completely a conscious process. But in a nutshell, if you're expecting to come across a certain pattern, and typically we do have these expectations based on experience, we want to see faces when they're present, and so forth, then you're going to focus your attention on looking for evidence consistent with that pattern. If you have an object that you are focusing on, then naturally you are not simply going to be automatically processing whatever is in view. This is your bottom-up processing approach. We take data from the outside world, we bring it in, and we look at the individual components. That's bottom-up processing. We do use this bottom-up processing sometimes, taking the external data and piecing together information. For example, if you are looking at Lon James' painting and you're not familiar with his work, you might use the bottom-up approach in this case because you're going to say, okay, I see some lines and I see some red blotches and so forth. But again, typically, we have an expectation of what matters. We know what we want to be looking at. And so then the top-down approach to object recognition is going to be at the forefront of our processing. So you can think of your top-down recognition process as being fine-tuned to mainly look for the features in a pattern that are of interest to you or that matter to you. And it's going to squelch or it's going to lessen the impact of anything else. So I thought we'd do a little exercise to distinguish between these two types of object recognition, your top-down, guided by history, guided by knowledge approach, and your bottom-up approach, guided by the raw data. All right, so I'm going to show you a series of pictures. Your job is to study each picture as we flip through, and we will be doing it fairly quickly, so be ready. We'll hit a certain point, and you'll be asked to draw the pictures from memory. All right? All right, Sunday morning art class. You ready? Here we go. All right, here's picture one.
Can you start drawing now?
Three. How many do you have?
7.
You're halfway through the next exercise, too. All right, so who was able to remember all 5? Yeah? You think pretty good level of detail?
Sure.
Pretty confident? Sure? We can flip back through them quickly. All right, so here was picture 1. Here was 2, 3, 4, and picture 5. All right, so we're going to do this task again, but this time you're going to have a little bit of extra help. All right, so we're going to do it again, 5 more pictures, a little bit of assistance this time. All right, picture 1. Picture 2. My favorite one. 3.
Well, that's easy to remember, even typing.
Picture 5. All right, so same thing. Draw as many images as you can.
Those images all have patterns. The first one I didn't. These all have unique patterns except for the last one. Here's the back of this. Last one doesn't have.
Which one? Oh.
See, this is 2, 6, and 3.
So how did you find the task this time? Harder? Is what, sorry?
These were too big.
I'm not even-
When I came up with one word
Okay.
association, this one, I was confused by the big sentence.
Okay, so
It is, because
is it fair to say that you applied meaning to the first set and this set I applied meaning for you? All right, who found that the task was easier? Who found easier? Okay, good. And you know what's kind of fun, I'll show you the 5 pictures again, is when I first learned about this activity, I was told everybody's going to find round 2 easier, because round 2, we apply meaning to the task. We tell you what you're looking at, right? We tell you what these 3 circles actually mean. And so everybody should find it easier. But what I found is, in fact, a number of people do find round 2 more difficult because you add your own meaning, right? You look at it and you say, okay, I can't just try to remember what these lines look like. I'm going to have to create my own story, my own history for the picture. So we do have a subset of people who do find task 1 easier than task 2. Typically, though, people find that it's much easier with the meaning attached.
Can I just make a quick comment? Part of the reason that task 2 was easier as well, I knew in advance how many things I had to remember.
Yeah,
How much I have to remember.
For sure. So I should add a better control there next time as well. Yes.
Well, several of them were amusing, and it's like somebody telling me 5 jokes in a row. I won't remember all 5. I'll remember maybe 1 or 2.
Right. And so the additional information can almost be distracting then as well. Good. So these images are called doodles. So doodle, combination of a doodle and a riddle. So initially it just looks like some sort of picture. You add that label, and the intention is for it to become obvious. Again, this is a fun one for me because it's an imperfect exercise. And every time I do the exercise, it's imperfect. And to me, that's great because it tells us that we all experience the images differently, right? Some of us are being fed 5 jokes in a row. Others say, okay, this label, this is so helpful. I just need to remember the words, and now the pictures will come. So we attach a label, then we put the doodle into context. But again, there's an important subset. We put the doodle into context themselves. Yes.
do people that can read Chinese do better on these?
I'm not aware aware of any research that has looked at cross-language differences. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I will try to take a look this afternoon and see if I can come up. Actually, I can try to take a look at breakdowns, see if I can get an answer for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, with this exercise, like we saw with our expectation to see faces, the role that the top-down processes can play in object recognition can explain some of the reasons why these tasks are easier, why they're difficult. And of course, we can talk about errors that we make as well. Just as sometimes we see a face on Mars and it's not really a face, we can make other sorts of errors in daily life as well. So we're going to talk about one error in particular. This is unintentional blindness. And so, story time, a few years ago, driving up to the Cold Lake Air Show, and I've been taught by my friends, Kelly, if you're in the passenger seat, you're not allowed to scream when something goes wrong. And so, I just quietly say to my friend who's driving, John, horse. He's driving, horse. He's driving, horse! Right? Finally, I got to scream. And so he puts on the brakes. There is a horse in the middle of the road. Probably a number of you have been in that experience as well. Right? You're paying attention to the highway. You're watching the speedometer. You're checking for oncoming traffic. And all of a sudden, there's a deer standing in the middle of the road. And you didn't notice until it was almost too late. Sound familiar? Yeah? You were paying attention to your driving. Nobody believes you, right? Everybody says, oh, you were spacing out, that's why you missed the horse, or that's why you missed the deer. But, in fact, having our eyes open, seeing, does not necessarily mean that we will be recognizing when there's an unexpected visual event that takes place. So we're going to try out a lab example now. It's a video. I encourage you to follow the instructions in the video, and we'll chat briefly at the end.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball. The correct answer is 16 passes.
And one gorilla.
Did you spot the gorilla?
Yep.
For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half is the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color for the player on the black team leading the game? Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold. When looking for a gorilla, often there's other things. And that's the monkey business illusion. Learn more about this illusion in the original.
All right, any honest people want to admit that they missed the gorilla? Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. We had a few who missed the gorilla. Who missed the player leaving the game? Oh, just about everybody. Good. And color changing curtains? Oh, almost everybody. Great. All right. So we can miss things then, even when we're expecting a trip, even when we're expecting a surprise of some sort. You're driving along, you're expecting there could be a deer or a moose from New Brunswick or, a horse or something in the middle of the road, but we can still miss it. The gorilla was in the video for the seeing. It's just that our expectations drove our attention elsewhere. We were supposed to be counting the basketball passes. And so again, unintentional blindness then is our inability to notice something that's happening right in front of us. Usually this is because it's unexpected. Maybe it's because our attention is focused elsewhere. So looking then is not the same as seeing. Rather, we create our visual world, right? We create our experience. What we see reflects not only what is really there, but what we expect to see, what prior knowledge tells us to see or wants us to see, and what we are looking for. All right, so thank you very much for taking part today.
So we have lots of time for questions, about 15 minutes or so. Other questions? And I think Kelly has indicated she'll take questions, so feel free to ask.
Yeah.
Our experience is due to what we experience. How do we know what's real, or how,
Oh, that's a really important question. How do we know what's real? In a sense, we might not, right? When you view the cube, is it really a cube oriented in one direction or in another? Well, it's ambiguous, so both are real, right? When you are driving, how do you know if you're really seeing everything that's there? You might not, right? So unless you are sitting down and trying to find only the raw data and removing your personal experience and so forth, you might not actually know what's really there. It's actually a bit of a debate in qualitative research because there's an approach to this form of research. When you're interviewing people and studying the transcripts and so forth, there's an approach that says, listen, you have to remove all of your expectations and all of your understandings and just go from the words on the page. And it's pretty much impossible to do, right? And so what are you really seeing? Well, you're seeing a combination of what's really there and what you're thinking that you're seeing. Other questions? Yes.
Just going back to the cube. So you've probably seen on the internet where there's a ballerina spinning around and it says, point left man or right man, whatever that means. And my objection to this is that just as with the cube, you can make the ballerina go one way or the other. Now, I guess what I've never tested for myself is, do people initially go for one and then to force themselves to change to the other direction? Is there a preference one way or the other in general population?
For the ballerina, I'm not sure which direction is, sorry. For this cube, it's to see the corner there as in back rather than in front. Again, based on experience, right? If I'm looking at the squeezy brain, I'm looking down at it, not up at it.
The reason the ballerina is interesting is that there is that bias, right?
For spinning. Well, it makes you wonder though, right? What in the world have you seen spinning before that has told you perhaps how to experience that? Pardon? Yeah. A lot of things go clockwise as well, so that could be partly driving people's experience on that. That's it. Oh, thanks.
Regarding the riddles you were having spoken to earlier, have there been any tests checking the absurdity of the riddle, so to speak, rather than something more literal? Is when you're going through mnemonic training or memory training, the person that I'm talking about exaggeration or absurdity as a memory aid because it's makes it stand out for an object, say, and seeing, for instance, those riddles that are coming up in there was kind of something bizarre, whereas the earlier ones, the mnemonic cue, if people were describing it more literally without crazy learning from that account of the performance, and is there anything looking at that specifically?
There has been, but not on the rules, to the best of my understanding. It's usually used more as an in-class example than as a research protocol. But absolutely, his point is that if we make something kind of bizarre, then we're going to remember it better anyway. But see, we can argue that that's that top-down processing in place, right? Rather than as an alternate explanation. I'd argue that that's part of the top-down process. It's bizarre, and I'm thinking, well, why is it kind of strange? Oh, it's a pig looking at books in the library and so forth. And so adding that down is adding our story, our history, and our expectation to the experience.
I had something on top-down too. You said no hard questions.
I did say no hard questions. you can throw one more out.
I'll bring it back.
Oh, I can admit if I don't know the answer. All right. All right, anyone else? Yes.
Referring to the motion business in your experience or your research, have you found that similar experiments or videos where you have multiple things going on at a time and pay attention to one thing, is that harder or easier is that harder or is there no difference to drawing attention between senses? So you have to pay attention to auditory
Okay, so is there a sense confusion, or is it easier to do? And so, would you be saying, like, if we're watching the video and then I miss water in your face and that sort of distraction, is that what you mean?
Specifically, I was thinking auditory cues. Like, just pay attention to how many times I've done it.
As opposed to more visual. My understanding is that typically the multiple things happening visually would be more strain on your working memory system, right, on your processing, than something that is happening as an auditory cue as well.
So a car that tells you how fast you're going to keep more attention on the road.
Well, so if you're speaking, okay, so you're getting into sensory cell phones here. Yeah, it's marginally better to have the car telling you your speed than to be looking at the speed. But it's a very small difference, not necessarily enough to have any meaning for safety. And so much of the research, as you know, it's contradictory, but much of the research on the hands-free cell phones is that it is just as dangerous, and just as much a draw on your attention as having the multiple visual, looking at the phone and so forth. We seem to have a general attention thing, and when it's drained, that's gone. We can't say that we have a specific memory bank for auditory cues, one for visual cues, and so forth. So very small effects there.
Sorry, I'm really sorry. I can't tell the time, so it turns out we don't have 15 minutes per question. We can take one more though. So please.
Okay, I think you had your hand up first.
Is there any research with the monkey in the illusion where you don't have the instructions and test what the people observed that didn't receive any instructions before the test took place?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And you're going to see the monkey.
Do you see everything, or do you just see?
Well, it depends on the individual if you see everything, because you might be caught up in, wow, what is this a video of? And the screen changes, the curtain changes color. So you might not notice that, but you're going to notice the obvious visual distortions like the monkey.
And also, are riddles like what you guys use in classrooms now instead of stuff like Rorschach tests, or are those still in practice?
Typically not. Your Rorschach test is associated with the psychoanalytic Freudian kind of psychology, and that's been largely replaced, especially outside of the U.S. There's a small number of people still using the psychoanalytic approach in a few countries, but it's been largely replaced.
It's been found to be not as honest?
You can't test it scientifically.
Oh.
Really hard to do empirical research on those approaches. All right, thank you so much for coming.